Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hello, everybody. It's 2 o'clock, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Robin Moore, and this is the workshop on basically step 1. We're going to do a little work out of the book and the workbook and really talk about powerlessness and unmanageability. First of all, thank you for coming to this workshop. I truly appreciate it. You always have that fear that nobody will show up. And I'd like to ask, how many people are from the desert? Oh, good. How many people are from out of the area? And where would out of the area be? San Diego. Okay, welcome. San Diego. San Diego? Torrance. Orange County? Torrance. Okay.
The Valley.
The Valley?
Imperial Beach, which is south of San Diego.
Okay, you came quite a ways. Well, thank you all for coming. I hope this has been a good workshop or a good convention for you so far. My CoDA birthday is March the 24th, 2008. I came into CoDA basically after a relapse on drugs and alcohol. I'm going to share with you 5 minutes how I got here, because to me, my codependence is very life-threatening. It's a life-threatening disease for me. First of all, though, I want to read something from the book. It's on page 2, and it gives a definition out of the book of what codependence is. It says, codependence is a disease that deteriorates our souls. It affects our personal lives, our families, children, friends, and relatives, our businesses and our careers, our health and our spiritual growth. It is debilitating, and if left untreated, causes us to become destructive to ourselves and others. Many of us come to a point when we must look beyond ourselves for help. And I can truly identify with that paragraph. For anybody that comes in late, come ahead and get a packet, and if you don't have a pen or a piece of blank paper to take notes, feel free to come up and get that. So I came into CoDA in 2008. What happened was I had had 7.5 years of sobriety from alcohol and drugs, and I loved my life sober. Absolutely loved sober living. Was connected with the other 12-step program, and as a good codependent, when they say you never say no to a request, boy, I never did. And I mean that literally. But what happened was I started right before my relapse, about 6 to 7 months before my relapse. I kept going to meetings and everything, but what I was doing was I was taking care of everybody but myself, because that's what I've done all my life. I could walk into a room and kind of get a feel for what was going on, and the person that was the neediest, I would gravitate to. In that 6 months before my relapse on drugs and alcohol, I had been in a long-term relationship, and we moved in together. We were taking care of his mother, who had a violent form of Alzheimer's. My best friend was in the hospital on a ventilator, on the verge of death, and I was working 2 full-time jobs. Now, I'll go to tell you, my codependency starts from very young, because when I told my dad I had 2 full-time jobs, one as a risk manager and one as a charge nurse on the floor, so I worked all night shift, then I'd get off night shift at the same hospital, and then I'd work 8 hours as risk management. My dad grinned and patted me on the back and said, "I am so proud of you." So it comes, I come from a long family of codependency. Most of them don't know it though, but that's okay. So I relapsed. I literally burned myself to the ground and couldn't clearly tell you why. So I got sober again in November 7th, 2007. Ended up in a locked mental ward because I was very suicidal. Spent some time in jail, lost my job, lost my home, lost my relationship. Everything was gone. And someone suggested to me, and then I was in a long-term treatment, and someone suggested, it was about January, maybe February, that I needed to go to Codependence Anonymous. And I had never heard of it. I used to joke about being a codependent. Oh yeah, I'm a codependent like everybody else, but I had no idea what it was. And it was such a strong suggestion that I decided to take him up on it. This lady told me at the time that I was surrounded by toxic relationships and I had not a clue how to take care of myself. And of course, my first impulse was to just deck her because I thought, what do you know? I'm a nurse. I can take care of myself. Look at how good I take care of my patients. I can take care of myself. Of course, it didn't matter that my life was in ruins and I was in a hole where I felt like there was just no hope and I was full of despair. And so I started going. And I can tell you from the very first meeting, and I gave you a copy of it in here, is the patterns and characteristics. We read these. And at that time, it wasn't even that long. 2 years ago, they added stuff to it. So I remember, I don't know whether I read it or someone else read it, but I remember all of a sudden, it was kind of like the round peg went into the round hole. Things that I knew I had been doing but could never put them to words were on this paper. And it was the key. Now, what I know for myself today is the codependency is at the core of every one of my addictions. Because I learned from an early age, I got certain messages from my parents, and I'm not talking about blame, I'm just stating it honestly, that I took into adulthood. And let me tell you, I've been addicted to about anything that you can think about. Drugs, alcohol, sex. When we discovered avocados when we moved out to California, that's all I wanted to eat for a month. When Titanic came out, I watched it 10 times in a row. I mean, gambling, shopping. I remember going out and buying a whole room full of furniture, and I already had a house full of furniture and didn't need any. I mean, I was doing all this stuff to try to fill that hole. Because I didn't know. I didn't know that what I was doing, and this was even in sobriety, I was taking these behaviors, these core behaviors that were developed from messages I received as a child into adulthood, and I was just repeating them over and over and over. What I didn't know, I told myself lies. I said that, I was separating with love. I was detaching. Well, most of the time it was avoidance or cutting you off because I was done with you. You know what I mean? I moved around. I can't tell you how many times. I don't have friends from when I was a child other than my siblings. High school, I admire people that have friends from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I think, wow, I'm impressed because that was not my life. But when I came to CoDA, things were different for me. And the first time I worked step one was in 2008, and we did a workshop. Cindy, I was living in Big Bear then, and she was the one that kind of put it on, and there was about 9 of us. Some came from the desert here, and I was living up there, and some from Big Bear. And I think all 9 of us cried for 2 days. It was nothing like I had ever done before, okay? And step one for me was kind of it was the first time in my life I got to realize how I had been lying to myself for years and years and years. How I didn't have a relationship with myself. It was all about my relationship with you. You defined what I did. You defined how I acted, what I believed. I had to earn your love. I had to earn God's love. And I was nowhere on the list. So all of a sudden, for the first time, now we're going back into childhood. And I had trouble with that in the beginning. A lot of these questions, now you've got some handouts here. Skip to step 1. It's page 26 and 27. And it's the copy of step 1 from the book, from the CoDA book, Codependence Anonymous. And I think what we need to do is
maybe grab all of those and bring them to the back. That way we don't.
just grab. Yeah, there you go.
Back and forth.
Yeah.
I'm controlling.
Well, if you're going to be, this is the place to be it, so it's okay. We'll allow you. Okay, on page 28 are these questions. What neglect and abuse did I experience growing up? Where did I learn to turn my head when I or other people were being neglected or abused, and why? Who in my childhood displayed these behaviors or instructed me not to tell or share my feelings about it? Where did I learn that avoiding others was safer than being involved? Where did I learn to control others for my sense of well-being? How did I learn that I wasn't good enough or was better than others? When, where, and how did I learn to deny my own thoughts, feelings, and needs for the sake of others, or conversely, to demand that the world revolve around me? How did I know never to tell the family secrets, and why? Where did I learn to behave in neglectful or abusive ways that are intellectually, emotionally, physically, sexually, and or spiritually harmful? Where did I learn to express these behaviors, which are often communicated in the extremes from silence to violence? How did I learn to allow them to be expressed towards me? Where and how did I learn that having a relationship would make me whole? Did I learn these things through others' words or actions? If so, whose? How had I come to survive life through codependent behaviors rather than living life through a sense of freedom? What are my true feelings about all of these questions? Now, the first time I answered those questions, I thought they were yes and no answers. Made sense to me. Because don't you know, I had the perfect upbringing, and there was no way I was going to say anything in judgment about my parents. Because I'd never looked through honest eyes before. Now, I got to tell you, I loved both my parents. My mom died in her 50s, and my dad's still alive, 80 years old, running marathons. I love the man. But there's a lot of things that I've learned that I can't talk to him about today. And our relationship is 100 times better than it's ever been. But it was real hard for me to begin to answer these questions, because that meant I had to go back to my childhood. And I had to look truthfully, without blame, without saying they did this to me. It's their fault I'm this way. Because I thought I'd be struck by lightning if I even looked at that. But thank goodness, Cindy, who has a lot of years in Codependence Anonymous, guided us through this process. And what we did is we started going back into our childhood to look at these messages. I'll pick one of the questions here. When I was a child, we didn't talk about feelings. I'm from that age. We didn't talk about feelings in our household. I have a dad who is emotionally unavailable. And as a result, every man that I've had a relationship with, including the one I married many, many years ago, was emotionally unavailable. And I had a mom who was probably undiagnosed bipolar and had some depression going on and some severe PMS, which was not addressed back then. So I had a dad who didn't show any emotion and a mom who was all over the place. And a lot of the messages we got were, you don't need to be feeling that way. What are you crying for? There's no need to be crying. You don't need to be upset. We don't talk about that. And God forbid that you talk about it outside the home. That was just an unwritten law. Another message I got was that achievement. I had to achieve to get your attention. Another one was you couldn't say no. If once I said yes, I couldn't say no. And so very early on, I learned to, and it's the first thing on the list of patterns and characteristics, is, or actually it's the second. I minimize, alter, or deny how I truly feel. As a child, I learned to tuck that away really early. Unless they were the good feelings. That was okay. But anything else, no. So what happened is, and we read about it here in the questions here on page 28. Where did I learn to express these behaviors, which are often communicated in the extremes from silence to violence? So I would tuck in all this stuff that was going on, all this negative stuff. Anger, frustration. I didn't know how to process them. I wasn't taught that. My parents weren't taught that. They passed on to us what had been passed on to them. And learning how to openly address feelings was not part of it. So I swung from silence, which I learned later to use as a form of punishment and manipulation, to violence. All of a sudden, I'd erupt in this rage. And at the moment, I couldn't tell you what it was from because I didn't know why. It usually wasn't over that event that it happened over. It was all this stuff that builds up. And mind you, I've carried this now into adulthood. So by this time, I'm a master at controlling, manipulating, lying, and I lied about everything. No, I didn't even have to have a gun to my head. You know what I mean? I made up a lie about everything because that's what I'd been doing for so long. You'd ask me something simple like, would you like to go to lunch? And I'd think to myself, I really don't want to go to lunch. But what I did was, I couldn't tell you that. So I'd make up some big story. That's how my mind worked. And that just developed over the years. So for the first time in step 1, it's asking me to be truly honest. And now let me pause here a minute. How many people have work steps in Codependence Anonymous? Excellent. How many people go to meetings in Codependence Anonymous? Oh, good. And then how many people haven't worked steps? Okay. Well, I'm glad you're all here. And for those that haven't worked steps, this is life-changing. The rewards are huge. Some of the hardest work I've ever done, but the rewards are huge. And I'm one of those that believes in meetings. I believe in steps, and I believe in sponsorship. And for a long time, when I lived up in Big Bear, sponsorship was our group. I started a meeting up there because we didn't have anybody with long-term Codependence Anonymous time. And that was one of the benefits of moving down here to the desert, was there's a lot of people with time down here. So here, step 1, for the first time, it's asking me to get totally honest about things that I'd never even looked at before and actually truly denied. Didn't even want to look at. They were scary. It was easy for me to recognize powerlessness and unmanageability with my alcohol and my addiction. You just don't drink. You don't pick up a drug. I could clearly state what the unmanageability was: going to jail, losing your job, your finances in a wreck, almost losing my profession. I mean, the list was long and plenty over the years, okay? That was real clear. But what was difficult for me to understand was powerlessness and unmanageability as a result of untreated codependency. And what happened when we started doing this work in step 1, when I first came into CoDA, what I felt like was I was full of despair. I felt like my life had been going in the wrong direction my whole life, and I didn't have a clue on how to turn it around. I couldn't tell you why I had relapsed on drugs and alcohol, because I had loved my life. I didn't have any answers anymore. I was completely defeated. Felt like I was in a black hole I was never going to get out of. So then I started coming to meetings, started doing some work on step 1. And they started talking about all this stuff here. Now, the first 2 things I identified with on this list were the minimize, alter, deny how I truly feel. That was real clear to me. I knew that. And the other was, I'm extremely loyal, remaining in harmful situations too long. I was really clear on that one, okay? Because remember when I talked about working the 2 full-time jobs? A month of taking that second full-time job, I knew I needed to quit. But did I? I didn't. Because how would it look? I couldn't go to my administration and say, I can't do this. I can do one or the other, but I can't do both. Because if I did that, that proved to you that I wasn't worthwhile. And what would you think of me? And that, I couldn't possibly let you know what I thought of myself. So those 2 I was real clear about from the beginning. And I thought, well, I'm not too bad off. 2 out of a whole list. I remember the list wasn't that long then. I'm thinking, okay, this is workable. This is doable. But I hadn't started step 1 yet. So one of the things that we started doing in step 1 is we started going through the questions in the book, and then after the pages 28 through 31, then it's a 2-sided copy of what's from the workbook. And the first part is it talks about step 1, and then the back part is questions, okay? So I think what we're going to do real quick is let's read through. Where's my page? Let's read through step 1 in the book and step 1 in the workbook, okay? Because there's some things that come out real clear. Okay, step 1. We admitted we were powerless over others, that our lives had become unmanageable. On powerlessness, until now we had applied self-control, obsessiveness, and our own clouded thinking to our problems of living. When our relationships broke down, many of us just tried harder, applying our arsenal of misinformation with a vengeance.
I'm still trying to find where you are.
Oh, page 26,
Okay.
down at the bottom. And remember, when I talked about the lies that I've been told myself all of my life, that's some of my arsenal of misinformation. That I had to earn your love, I had to earn God's love, that I had to achieve in order to prove that I was worthwhile. Our self-will took many forms. We were overbearing, we were people pleasers, we conformed, we rebelled, we blamed, we hurt ourselves, and we hurt others. Some of us had to go to the edge of insanity or death before we were willing to admit our powerlessness. And all the while we were convinced we were doing the right thing. Where was success? Now, I was one of these people that had to take it to the edge of death. That's why I was in a locked mental ward. I was absolutely suicidal with a plan and everything. I had my spot picked out of the Arctic Circle. And to show you how unclear my thinking was, the day that they got a bed for me, my doctor got a bed for me in treatment, and I said, well, I'll drive myself down. And the lady says to me, "No, you can't do that." And I said, "Well, why not?" She said, "Robin," she said, "your doctor and you both agree you're suicidal." She said, "This is not a good idea. You're coming from 7,000 feet going down to what? And I'm sure there's many areas that you can drive off the road." It's like she read my mind. That's how clouded my thinking was. So I literally had to take it to the edge of death. On unmanageability, chances are that by the time we reached CoDA, our lives were out of control. The coping skills we had relied on for a lifetime were no longer working. We were the victims of a compulsive way of behaving so subtly powerful and damaging that no ordinary means could break it. Our lives were truly unmanageable. It was at this point that our old ideas began to crumble, and we became open to the possibility that there might be another way. And this line, the coping skills we had relied on for a lifetime were no longer working. And I got to tell you, I've met a lot of people with a lot of time in sobriety in other 12-step programs that at 10 years, 16, 17, 18 years, all of a sudden, things are not working for them anymore. They're sober, and I got to give them a lot of credit. They didn't do what I did. I relapsed. They didn't, but they have brought themselves to CoDA because these core behaviors were still acting out even in sobriety. All journeys begin with the first step. Our journey of personal recovery in CoDA begins with the CoDA first step. To understand the growing devastation of our powerlessness and unmanageability, we must explore our past and how we arrived at this point. Tricky line there. We have to go back, and I mean way back. Maybe we're devastated by a divorce, separation, or a loved one's death. Maybe we tried killing ourselves or slowly bottomed out from drugs or alcohol. Many of us are overwhelmed and weary. Once we make the decision to change, we start our recovery journey with step 1, the step of admission and acceptance. This step helps us to identify our lifetime of experiences, feelings, and behaviors, to pinpoint how we avoid, control, and manipulate ourselves, other people, and circumstances. We learn how we become our own higher power or placed others in that role. We begin to see that God has not given us the right to control another person's behavior, but we have been given the responsibility to set limits and boundaries for ourselves with others. To explore how we control and avoid ourselves and others, we search our personal histories. We ask ourselves the following questions to see if they apply to our lives. And then skip over to the next page, 29. By answering these questions, we gain an understanding of how our powerlessness developed in our childhood, but knowing this is not enough. We must see the unmanageability of the codependent behaviors we carry into our adult lives. To explore our unmanageable adult codependent behaviors, we find it helpful to review the first chapter in its outline of the denial, low self-esteem, control, and compliance patterns. We specifically list those patterns which represent our adult codependent behaviors. It's important to be honest with ourselves to change our unmanageability. By exploring the powerlessness of our childhood and the unmanageability of our adult lives, we come to understand more about our personal heritage. Our denial of codependence fades, our acceptance increases, and we're better able to see our destructive adult behaviors. It is extremely important to remember that our first step is not to be used to assign blame to others or to ourselves. That's a really important phrase right there. To others as well as ourselves. We're not on a witch hunt. By holding on to blame, we react codependently and remain powerless. Rather than blame, we attempt to review our childhood and adult experiences that are the roots of unhealthy behaviors. We acknowledge how powerlessness and unmanageability developed in childhood and gradually manifested themselves in our adult behavior and relationships. We accept that our lives get crazier the more we try to control and avoid others and ourselves. Rather than blame others or ourselves, we become accountable for our feelings about our childhood and adult experiences, as well as our progressive adult codependent behavior. We find it helpful to list the losses we've experienced in our childhood and adult life. We allow ourselves to grieve these losses, the pain and anger we've held on so long. And this is another actually task with step 1. You want to make a list of your losses. And it's really important. That's one reason why working with a sponsor or a small group of people that are doing the steps together is because people think, okay, yes, I lost a husband, I lost a wife, I lost a job. What you don't think about, though, is maybe the loss of that first pet that you absolutely loved. The loss of every relationship I had that I walked away from, that I thought this was going to be the one. The loss of my self-esteem over the years from all my addictions and self-destructive behaviors. The loss of my professional integrity. I lied. I cheated. That list of losses is really important. Here again, it's a chance for us to become really honest, because what we've done is this: we've just kept adding to this list over the years. So that's why it's really important to work with someone or a group. Get together and do the steps together, because you will help each other identify losses that maybe you had never even thought of. So you see how important this list is? So it's telling us right now, it's giving us one of our first assignments in step 1 is to start with a list of losses. And you need to bounce that off of someone that you trust. A sponsor or a group that you're doing the steps together. One, so that you know you've got support, that they're validated. There's nothing worse than saying, oh God, what you feel, that's no loss. Get over it. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's what I heard a lot when I was a kid. Get over it. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Get on with it. So loss was something I didn't really deal with too well. I just tucked it away and kept moving on. So by the time I got to CoDA, let me tell you, I spent the first 2 years crying. I swear to God I did. I cried at the drop of a hat, and I couldn't even tell you why, because it was all, I'd piled it up over all these years. So here it's given us the very first assignment in step 1 is to do that list of losses. As we release these feelings, we begin to release the energies that drive our codependent behaviors. We see that our codependent behaviors of manipulation, control, and avoidance have only left us in despair. Many of us share our first step with our sponsors and friends in recovery. We share our past experiences, losses, and grief. In doing so, we begin to release the emotional depths of our powerlessness and unmanageability. Once we do, we begin to accept our past and think more positively and act in healthier ways with ourselves and others. By understanding and accepting our codependent powerlessness and unmanageability of our lives, we open the door to possible solutions. We admit that our best effort in these areas have failed and that we need greater help than our own limited abilities can provide. From this position of admission and acceptance, we are ready to reach for the help of a power greater than ourselves to restore us to sanity. So what starts happening in step 1, now, we looked at these questions that were in the book in step 1. It's asking us to make a list of losses. You know what it's doing? It's tapping into our emotions. And as a good codependent, I worked real hard to show you only the good stuff until I'd go along, and then every now and then I'd just erupt. I'd be like a volcano or a tornado, like it says in another program, because I literally was that. And so what it's doing is we're beginning to tap into some really, for a lot of us, uncomfortable emotions. And I know that Cindy and I did a workshop recently. Now, we started off, it took us over a year to take people through the 12 steps. We started off with 20 people. By the time we got to step 3, we dropped down to 9 or 10. People, they just couldn't, wouldn't, were unable. It doesn't matter the reason. They just couldn't go any further. That's because you're tapping into some stuff that as a codependent is really uncomfortable. To show you these feelings, loss, grief, anger, vulnerability, shame, fear. Let me tell you, that's not something I wanted to do willingly. But I was at a desperate point in my life. I was driven by the fact that I knew if I didn't, then I was going to commit suicide. And I already had a pretty clear plan worked out. It was a pretty good spot on the Arctic Circle. Not too many people had survived that drop before, so I figured, I was pretty much goner. Or I'd relapse on drugs and alcohol again. And, between the two, one way or the other, I wasn't going to be on this earth anymore. So, for me, it was really clear. Whether it was uncomfortable or not, I had to do it. And sometimes that's what worries me when I hear people sharing meetings, is that they don't realize this is a life and death disease. And I ask myself, are they really being honest with themselves about themselves? Are they minimizing the things that happened in their life? Are they minimizing messages that they got when they were a child? Because if we're really honest with ourselves, we can take codependency to a self-destruct mode in the drop of a hat. And when you hear people that have 10, 16, 18, 20, 30 years of sobriety having meltdowns, and these are people that, they work steps, they go to meetings, they sponsor people, and their lives are in meltdown. So they've already in a program of recovery. Then we're talking a pretty scary disease here. Go ahead.
So here it says, once we do, we can begin to accept our past. So would you mind sharing with us what some of the things that you did that helped you, make friends with all these emotions that you were bringing up through looking at your losses?
How that happened for me was through this step work. Literally. Taking it one step at a time. In step 1, for the first time, I had to look honestly at some things. And let me tell you, the emotions were out there. Like I said, when I cried for 2 years, I wasn't kidding. And I was angry, and I was frustrated, and I was intolerant, and my emotions were all over the place. Because I was learning.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
It started with step 1, the work I did in step 1, going back to my past and looking at how my life was unmanageable as a result of codependency. And then in step 2, it's starting to develop a relationship, or begin to open the possibility to a relationship with a power greater than myself. And that's what Codependence Anonymous is all about. Developing a relationship with myself, with my higher power, and then with you guys. See, I had it all mixed up. You guys were first. I figured, I was sober, so I had a pretty good relationship with God. Worked for me. And a relationship with myself, I had not a clue what that was. So how I learned to accept all this stuff was just step by step, doing the work and talking about what I was feeling, expressing what I was feeling. And it doesn't mean that once I started the work that I never did any of this stuff again. Let me tell you, I found out that I pretty much do 99% of what's on this list. In fact, when they came out with the revised edition 2 years ago, I was shocked because I thought I had a pretty good handle on what was there. Well, don't you know, I was doing so well. And then I find out avoidance has been most of my life. So there was a whole new category written for me. But it's been step by step. It's been day by day. It's been experience by experience. I surround myself with people who are doing the same work as I am. I go to meetings. I make phone calls. I work with others. Because let me tell you, this is not easy work, but the results are the most rewarding I've ever experienced in my life. Because for the first time, I'm developing relationships with people that are true relationships. And that's based on I'm finding out who I am, who my true self is. Like if you ask me, Robin, do you want to go to lunch today? And I'm tired. I'll say, no, thank you anyway. But, I think I'll pass. And I don't have to make up a huge long story. I don't have to try to convince you of something. I don't have to spend my time defending myself to you. Go ahead.
Would you say, I'm tired?
I might, or I might not.
Would you be okay with saying?
I'd be okay with
"Thank you
either way.
so much, but I'm tired"?
I'd be okay either way. What I've learned is the more lengthy my explanation is, the more codependent my behavior is getting. I believe in short and simple. And I surround myself with people that say, that's okay. You can do that.
Would you say, I'm sorry I can't, but I got a better offer?
Well, actually, you could. If that was what was your truth, absolutely. Yeah, you do. I can tell you that's the truth, because as a result of this step work, some relationships got closer and some I stepped away from completely, and I could only love those people from a distance. My relationship with every family member has changed. Couple for the better. Couple not necessarily for the worst, but they've gone the other direction a little bit. But I don't take on that guilt anymore. I don't take on responsibility. There's at our Monday night meeting, and I don't know who came to it with us, but they talked about the hula hoop, staying within your hula hoop. I am only responsible for what's in my hula hoop. Now, even if you're hugging someone and you're technically inside a hula hoop, you're not responsible for them. So just keep that in mind, okay? Like your husband or your partner. Okay, well, I'm responsible for her. We can both fit in the hula hoop, or him. They can both. No, technically, I'm responsible only for what's in my hula hoop. And do you know what a relief that is? That's freedom. That's what this whole convention is about. It's a new freedom. It's the freedom to make choices. It's the freedom to be honest. It's the freedom to find out who I am. And the freedom to not be in fear of what you think of me. Because that has driven my entire life. So why don't we go ahead and read step 1 in the workbook, and that's page 9. And then what we're going to do then is go briefly over these questions, and then the last half hour we're just going to open it up to questions and discussion, okay? To see what people have to say or share their own experience in working the steps. So this is step 1 from the workbook. That's that green workbook that goes through the 12 steps, and then in back it has the 12 traditions. Step 1. Step 1 begins our personal relationship with the steps of Codependence Anonymous. We admit that we are powerless over our disease of codependency to ourselves and to others. As we do this, many of us begin to experience a sense of belonging, and we see that we are not alone. Even though new behavior may feel uncomfortable, we can address each situation in our lives one at a time with the steps, beginning with step 1. We can stop trying to control. We can begin to establish a new relationship with ourselves. Saying we are powerless over our disease out loud to the group begins us on our road of truth. We begin to identify what we are powerless over and see the manifestations of our disease. We learn to identify some of the untruths we may have been taught. We come to realize that powerlessness does not mean weak. Controlling others does not make us safe. Looking to others for our direction does not support us in living our own lives. Judging others is not our business. And believing we are all powerful is painful. We experience how old tapes playing in our heads can control us. We discover that thinking in terms of black and white or right and wrong is rigid and limiting. As we work step 1, we begin to find the tools of recovery. Most of us find that using our CoDA literature as well as listening to others as they share their codependent characteristics helpful in the identification process required in step 1. We focus on ourselves and work on staying in the present. We begin to recognize a higher power. As we let go, we begin to release responsibility for others. We let go of what others think about us, knowing we are adults and have choices. Now these, I'm going to tell you, are 3 really important questions. If you're not someone that journals, I believe in journaling. I encourage you to journal. If you're not someone that has been doing this, start with these 3 questions. What do I want? What do I think? And what do I feel? Because most of my life I've asked, what do you want? What are you thinking? I know you're upset. What can I do to make it better? So for the first time, it's asking us to ask that for ourselves. And don't be surprised if you don't know the answer. I thought, oh my God, I'm a failure. I have no idea what I want. And what I felt. You know that chart? When you go into treatment, they give you this little chart that has all those little faces on it, talking about feelings. I had to use that a lot in the beginning because I'd feel something and I couldn't tell you what it was. So I would look on that chart and go, okay, it's somewhere between here and here, because they were words. And learning to identify what I was feeling. So those are 3 important questions. We can make a checklist of tools to support our recovery. We can be still and connect with the higher power. We begin to establish healthy boundaries, leave, call someone, take a walk around the block to better take care of ourselves. We learn that we have done enough when we have listened to our gut, prayed, written, or realized we don't have to make a decision right away. We also learn that it isn't necessary to like everything that we accept. We can learn the lessons of true humility and recognize we don't have all the answers. As we begin to let go of control, we are better able to accept the realities of being human. We find peace. Now, I need to make it clear for people that have not worked steps, this is all not going to happen with step 1. You're not going to finish step 1 and you're going to be, I'm totally at peace. I have no judgment. I'm not critical of anyone. I'm in line with God and the universe. I know exactly what I'm feeling. I know my truth. These are goals. And it's starting you off thinking about these things, okay? And you know what? By the time you get to that 12th step, you're going to know your truth in response to this stuff. You're going to know, you're going to learn how to set boundaries. Every time you set one little boundary, oh my God, it's like I've done some kind of Olympic accomplishment. I mean, it was so huge because saying no was not in my vocabulary. So just keep that in mind, okay, that you're not going to have that accomplished at the end of step 1. Now, what the next paragraph is giving us is it's starting to give us some promises. Our lives are different and rewarding when we are willing to work this step. We experience freedom, personal integrity, and self-empowerment. Developing a genuine interest in taking care of ourselves and honoring our intuition become priorities. As we let go of the need to control others, we begin to focus on that which we can take care of, ourselves. We can take our time and act with grace and dignity. When we are connected with ourselves in this step, we begin to have faith that we are capable of changing, and we learn to release our fears. We begin to recognize we are worthwhile and valuable. We can say thank you and give ourselves positive affirmations daily. And then it has questions in the back. So I picked on this page, it has like 4 questions. So let's go to that one. We're just going to go over those real quick. And before we get started on that, I gave you a couple other things in the packet. Of course, I gave you the patterns and characteristics. I gave you what is codependency, and this was something we got from a friend of ours from the LA area, their CoDA group. And then in the back, you've got the CoDA opening prayer, the CoDA closing prayer, you've got the set-aside prayer, and you've got the CoDA third step prayer. One of my favorites is the set-aside prayer. I just absolutely love that. And then, that's this one on the back of what is codependency, and on the back of that are the prayers. And then the very last page of the packet is, I copied from the book, what are the non-physical and passive forms of abuse and control? Because one of the things it starts talking about in step 1 is control and all the ways we control. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I had never really thought about what are the non-physical and passive forms of control. Analyzing others' behavior through logic or shame. There's somewhere in here it talks about sarcasm. A friend of ours looked up sarcasm, the Greek definition. You know what it means? Tearing of flesh. I've found out for me, sarcasm is anger. Frustration, intolerance. That's anger on its way. Those are my precursors. Sarcasm was something I used to be really good at. So I copied this page and also the other one, and I'm sorry I don't have the page numbers on here. The next one is, in looking at the ways, sometimes these words will hit home with, you have the list of patterns and characteristics of codependency, but some of this stuff is when you talk about unmanageability in your life as a result of codependency, maybe some of these words might strike home for you. And we're going to talk about that here shortly. So go back to the page that has the 4 questions on it. And so powerlessness, unmanageability, and denial. What does that look like in my life today? Well, I know in terms of powerlessness, when I first came to CoDA, I was powerless over my behaviors because I had not a clue what they were. Today, what I know is I am powerless over people, places, and things because I have an awareness of my behaviors now. I have an awareness of how I act out. It doesn't mean that once I recognize a codependent behavior that I go, whoa, don't do that, stop, and all of a sudden I change tracks. Sometimes I go right ahead with it because that's where I'm going. And then I kind of clean up. I make amends. I do what I need to do. That recently happened with my father. We were on the phone talking, and I got angry at him because this is a man that shows no emotion. I got angry at him, and I jumped on him and passed a judgment about what he was doing with his life. And towards about the middle of the conversation, guess who got angry at me? My dad. And he let me have it with both barrels. And what I found was we both gave as good as we got. So at the end of the conversation, I hang up, and I realize, well, I have to call and make an amends for my behavior. I had no right to pass judgment on what he's doing with his life. So I called to tell him, that I was making amends for how I spoke to him and the judgment that I had passed on him on how he's leading his life. This is an 80-year-old man who's in his right mind that runs marathons, works 60 hours a week, takes care of himself, carries in his own firewood, the whole bit. And he said to me, now he doesn't have a clue. He says to me, boy, Robin, are you getting soft as you're getting older? And I had to laugh because I thought, okay, he doesn't have a clue, but that's okay. I cleaned up my side of the street. And what I learned about that was, what I saw the good side of that was, I got to see some anger from my dad. Which, let me tell you, I can count on 2 fingers the times in my lifetime I've seen that. So I see some growth there, that maybe he felt safe expressing the anger towards me. You know, who knows? I'm not trying to figure out 2 things too much these days. So powerlessness, what does that look like in my life today? I talked about that unmanageability. Now, when I came into Codependence Anonymous, my unmanageability was, oh boy. I had pushed all my close friends away. I had just lost a long-term relationship, and I thought of that as the best relationship of my life. What I didn't know is there was emotional and verbal abuse. I thought as long as he wasn't physically abusing me, this was great. I wanted to grow old with this man. So I was staying in a relationship that was real harmful and didn't even see it. I lied. I manipulated. I was aggressive. I had periods of rage. I would silence. I mean, that's why I say a lot of these words presented to me how my life was unmanageable. And you have to look at that also in terms of spiritual, emotional, and physical. We have physical repercussions from unmanageability in our life. Think about it. Stress ulcers, chronic headaches, back pain, neck pain, can't sleep. There's a lot of physical symptoms that I've found for myself, and my guess is some of you have found that out for yourselves also, that show up in your life, and that's the unmanageability in your life. And sometimes I see those first before I really recognize what's happening. So it's really important to kind of, again, work with a group, work with a sponsor so that you can bounce things off of them. And denial. Well, today I'm not in denial. When I first came to CoDA, I was in denial. Because like I said, I thought what I do for a living, I help people. I'm a good, kind person. I never would do anything to harm you. Go ahead.
I just have a question with denial, because if you are self-aware enough to realize that you are codependent and that you're doing things that are harmful to yourself and or others, so you go, oh, I'm codependent and oh, I'm doing these behaviors, but you continue to do those behaviors. You keep saying, okay, well, starting tomorrow, I'm going to stop doing those. That's kind of a form of denial also, isn't it? I mean, like,
yes.
You know that you're
Yes.
doing it, but it's like you're still so caught up in it that you can't.
Absolutely.
You can't
Yes.
stop the behavior because you still haven't surrendered to the fact that you're like intellectually aware, but you still haven't emotionally.
Mhm.
So that would still be a form of denial.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And sometimes I'm perfectly aware of the behavior and what I'm doing, and I know there'll be repercussions, and I push my way through because, like I said, this stuff doesn't go away overnight. It's a process. And it talks about in the book that over and over and over, it's a process and it's a journey. And just because you've set a boundary with one particular individual that was a really close one in your life, and this was a huge boundary, and then the next time something comes up and you're not able to set that boundary, don't beat yourself up about it. Because every time you do it, that empowers you. But even when you're unable to do it, you're learning from that also. And one of the things we are really good at is being critical of ourselves. I don't know about you, but I was much more critical with myself than I was with anybody else.
I just read denial in my dictionary, and I was surprised at the last statement here. It says restriction of one's own activities or desires. And that was what...
Very good. That's a good definition. Excellent. So let me ask you guys, are you controlling? Question number 2. How do you control? I know I control through lying, manipulation. I had to have the last word. I was always right. Do what I tell you to do, not what I do. I criticized. I judged.
I expect everybody to do it Sharon's way.
It's a big one.
I mean, that's really a big one.
Expecting everybody to do it Sharon's way.
If you only did it my way, then this we wouldn't be going.
That's right. Right. My way is the right way.
That's right, the only way.
The only way. Yes. And you can look at it on your patterns and characteristics. It's got a whole category of control patterns. I was really good at I used charm and charisma to convince others of my capacity to be caring and compassionate. Oh my God, I was good at that. I could do it with a smile on my face and my arm around you.
I like becoming resentful.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I'm dealing with my parents now, so I'm back in my CoDA. Full force, full force.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing. It's amazing. This is a good place for me to be. Lots of reviewing, redoing, and, being at meetings. And I think the most important thing is realizing today that, since I'm not working and in my workaholism and everything else I did, even though I was sober all those years and I did do CoDA and I went on all those things, I had never really stopped. So once God stopped me with my medical disability, I would be sharing with my friends around, from whatever, like, wow, yeah, I thought I did all of this, how many layers of the onion or whatever it is, and I'm amazed at the rage that I have screamed and yelled and cursed at my father that I would have never done before. So, and I get a lot of help around that, and that's just what you're saying, like, wow, it's amazing, and I certainly don't want to act like that, and I was sharing not too long ago, I'm just so tired of doing 10 steps. Fortunately, my supporters are sharing their human, and you said it, we beat ourselves up unmercifully. I should have had this under control.
That's right.
So to speak.
I should have, would have, could have. God, I hate those words. And I just said them yesterday, too. And I got reminded because this was a friend in CoDA, and she said, should have, huh? I went, oh, God. Okay, I need to take those out of my vocabulary. So why do you control? Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Well, I was going to say is one of the ways that I have controlled in the past, I'm getting a little better at it now, but was to be a nice guy, to be never make waves, to be everybody's friend, so that I can make them like me. I want to make people like me. I want to control their attitude. It's a classic trait.
So you were the ultimate nice guy. Absolutely. Yeah, that would be charm and charisma. I think you'd fall into that category. Go ahead, George.
I think control is so deceiving too, because I've known too many people that by controlling, they give all their control away to another person because they don't want to control anything. So that's their control. You take control, and I'll just sit back and make my bitch list.
I'll be the victim. And then I'll blame you when things don't work out. And that was one of the first things I also learned in CoDA was I would tell you, if you'd asked me if I'd been the victim, I'd say absolutely not. But what I did is I bounced back and forth between being the victim and the victimizer, whatever that opposite of that word is. I bounced back and forth between that because there were times I gave over my control, just like George said. I wanted somebody else to make the decisions, to take responsibility. And if you didn't do it right, I was merciless in how I judged you about that.
One of the things that I learned is the first time you're a victim, after that you're a willing participant. So you just keep going back to the same behavior. I mean, and I find that we try to control everybody and everything, because then we never have to worry about controlling ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Cindy.
My favorite is when I'm feeling vulnerable and powerless, is to turn that around and believe that other people are capable of doing things. Charge in and save the day, whether they want to be saved or not.
Mm-hmm.
My husband and I have a standard joke when I get to that place. He introduces me and then he says, "She's management, I'm labor."
Well, I was the oldest of 5. I learned how to control and manage, and believe me, it was my responsibility to take care of the other kids. This went well into adulthood. I got called on more than one occasion because of how my siblings, younger siblings that were still at home, mind you, I was out of the home, how I was influencing them. And I wasn't even living in the same neighborhood, to say the least. So, I grew up as the oldest of 5, so control came to me. I could jump in and take charge. And also, I controlled because I couldn't let you see that I was fearful, that you might find out that I'm a fraud, that you might find out I wasn't worthwhile. You might really find out what kind of a human being I was. And all those thoughts I've had in my head all these years, God forbid that those would ever come out into the open. So, go ahead, George.
Being raised by a rager, anger can be one of the greatest control tools. Pouting. Oh God, if I don't do it, they'll be pouting all night. Distancing themselves, the quiet routine. There's just so many ways of manipulating and controlling that it takes a long time to really make that list and to see how many different ways I've had that I've been able to manipulate others, and control others. It's a very sad thing, but what I do know, and what my sponsor had me doing, was each time that I caught myself doing it in a relationship with someone else, that I have to feel the increase in my self-worth. Because it was a bitch to say, I'm 16 years sober, but I have no self-worth. And that hurts. It's a very hurtful feeling. Or maybe I have no self-worth compared to something else, but it would have to be to something else because I felt so low that I was doing certain things still at that time in my recovery, of the recovery program. So I look at control and I say, oh, but the blossoms from control are so many different blossoms to think of that it just amazes me because oh my God, that's the way they control. Yeah, there you go. I will be indifferent to you for 2 days on that one. Or his mother on Raymond, and everybody loves Raymond, and he says, but I didn't know you weren't talking. She says, I didn't talk to you for 3 days. He said, oh, I didn't know you weren't talking to me. The little things.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that it starts asking us to look at in step 1, is the ways that we control. Go ahead.
Well, the other part of it too is I know that when I was working, that my job was to control. I was paid a lot of money to control. They wanted to know, what did I think? What should I do? And then to take that and to not have that go into your personal life was very, very difficult. And one of the things I just saw, I love Cesar Millan, and it was very interesting. He was talking about dogs and how with dogs, when they get silent, they're deadly. It's not when they're barking, it's when they're quiet. And I just thought that's very interesting because I think that happens with humans too. A lot of humans, when they get silent, they're deadly. So just that whole combination of going from silence to rage, that is just as deadly and just as horrible when people are giving you the cold, not saying anything, which I didn't get for a long time.
I didn't either. I love this next question. When do I know I've done enough? Now, when I first started this as a new codependent, I could always do something more till I dropped dead. I mean, I would try everything in the book. So what are the ways you guys know that you've done enough?
When I'm tired, I need to go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Hmm?
oh, H-A-L-T.
That's an excellent one. Halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. When I start judging every driver on the road, going too fast, going too slow. Go ahead.
And I can't maintain an emotion for longer than a minute. It's like I'm immediately angry, and after that I cry, and then I'm calm and fine, and then the next time you say something to me, I'm gonna snap all over again.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a tidal wave just
Mm-hmm.
keep washing over you over and over again.
And the obsessive thought with that situation that I'm trying to fix or control, it keeps roaring in my head like on a loop, time and time again. Well, I could do this, and you're projecting. Oh, okay, I can say this, and then they'll do that, and then I'll say this, and then I'll do that. So ask yourself, how do you recognize that when you've done enough? Go ahead.
I think when I've had the same thought twice, by the time I count to 2, I know I've had it at least 4 or 5 times. And with other people, if I'm surprised once, and I'm surprised twice, that's pretty much enough.
Good.
One thing I hear from my sponsor a lot, which I love, is it just needs to be confident. Doesn't need to be extraordinary. It just needs to be confident. And I like that.
Mhm.
Because I think for a lot of us, it's got to be perfect.
Yes.
And not everything needs to be perfect.
Right.
Well, when I read this question, I said, well, when do I know I've done enough? I said, enough what? So I went back and looked at the page. And the question is before about what does surrender mean? Why do I need to surrender? What do I need to surrender? And then I read this. When do I know I've done enough surrender? And I thought to myself, well, I've never done enough surrendering because I have to surrender my life every day. And turn it over so I don't give myself into
Mm-hmm.
more difficulty.
And I also have to do that. I have this little sign over my sink that said, "Good morning, this is God. I will be taking care of all your problems today and will not need your help. So have a nice day. Love, God." Now, there I am in the morning in front of the sink, and God's in charge. By the time I've left the bathroom, I've already taken it back because I'm already working, So I have to surrender many times through the day to give it up and realize that, once again, I'm moving into an area that's going to cause me some difficulty. Thank you. A nice way to end. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.